Well, this is our sixth class, which is the last of this series. It seems to have gone very fast from my end. It's the thing about these 6-class series, they seem short compared to the 8-class. And so it's at the end of the class, we're going to put to rest coming to rest. So what is there to say still? I sort of felt like I was edging into it at the end of the meditation. Just to talk about 3 states of mind that are so helpful and which lead to rest, I think, which lead to coming to rest. So those include gratitude and goodwill and presence. Now, I'm not sure presence is a state of mind. I think it's not a state at all. It's really what we are. It's something we seldom notice because we're sort of fascinated by the content of our experience, whether it's what's going on in our physical body or going on in our mind or going on outside of us or going on in someone else's mind that we're talking to. We have this sort of tendency as human beings to not notice the most essential thing, which is our presence. It's really a gift we give to others, a gift we give to ourselves. And I use the word presence rather than mindfulness. Mindfulness to me is a little bit more of a state of mind where you're giving attention to different things that are present in your experience. There's mindfulness of breathing. There's mindfulness of thoughts. It's a quality of careful noticing. Presence is something deeper. It's like the essence of conscious awareness itself. That sense of here, that sense of now, which is always present. You ever notice that? It's always, the time is always now. When we're talking about consciousness, the time is always now. And the place we're at is always here. We never budge from that. It's actually what we are, I would say, here and now. And so it's possible to come to rest in presence in that way. It's actually less work than mindfulness, if I can put it that way. Mindfulness, like noticing the actual content in various ways of our experience. Presence just sort of rests right in the center of the here and now and notices whatever's passing through in space and time. It may land on this or that, but if you actually turn toward presence, you feel the shift and something slows down in my experience. There's kind of a slowing down and settling in and a quality which I could call heartfelt or soulful, or I could use a lot of words to point to it. There's a quality to presence. Sometimes you can notice it in other people who have a quality of presence. They're right there. They're not wandering away. They're not thinking what they're going to say next while you're talking. They're actually present, actually here. I believe that gratitude really can arise out of presence. It's part of the essence of presence to be grateful. Because whether you have this kind of discursive thought or not about it, it's like there's nobody who creates presence. I don't create my presence. It's a given. It's like the first gift. if you will, of existence is presence, is awake presence with things as they are. It's really quite remarkable that way. And so there's like just a kind of astonishment with that. And then everything that arises in presence is also kind of met in that same way, this kind of astonishment and gratitude. It constantly amazes me how beautiful things are, how that colors are colors, that light and shadow is light and shadow, that sound is sound. So very basic. But none of this has to exist, you know, none of it. And here it is. Whatever this thing is, presence, makes it all possible. And so I find that to be a font of gratitude. You know, sometimes we're grateful for our life. Of course, it's playing out of presence. But it's rare to turn it right towards this very thing we are, this opening upon life, this opening upon experience, this knowing and being that goes with that. And I do think this is really the core of the Buddha's teaching. It's the core of Buddhism is, you know, what do we awaken to? We awaken to what's actually already here. Awaken to presence. It's not as far away as sometimes it might seem to notice presence. And to feel something kind of relax and slip away in that. A way that we don't actually create ourselves, we don't actually keep ourselves in existence in the ways we think we do. I mean, obviously we have to eat, we have to not, you know, step out of the way of speeding cars. There are ways, of course, that we keep ourselves alive. On a very fundamental level, we don't. And so every moment can have this feeling of gratitude to it, potentially, every moment. You know, we come back to meditating on a regular basis. In some way, I believe, because we know this. We know it in our being, that there's something really wholesome about stepping out of getting things done, stepping out of trying to become somebody or be somebody, and just touch in the barest way what life is. Something deeply wholesome in that. Deeply restorative. Restorative not just of the body, but restorative of the sanity of the mind. You know, there's something very sane about it. And the quality of presence that I notice is still, it's stillness. There's a stillness in being present. That isn't necessarily a literal stillness of the body, or even stillness of the thinking mind. But, you know, you can walk down the street in presence, and it's almost as if the world is moving by you, you know? It's almost as if nothing is moving. Of course, things are moving, the body's moving, the visual kind of field is kind of moving towards you and moving behind you. And so there's a lot of movement, and of course sounds are happening and sensations are happening. It's full of experience. And yet right at the heart of it, something is still. When you touch into that sense of presence, something is still and unmoving. And it's mysterious because we don't really know what it is. There's nothing there to be seen. There's nothing there to be known. I mean, I occasionally have moments of what I think of as savoring myself, with sort of the savor of Mark Hart. There's a particular kind of personality, there's a particular kind of feeling that goes with being me. And I've come to appreciate that, come to love that. But there's presence is even deeper. It's like presence is what witnesses that. It's what presence might actually notice your personality, notice what it's like to be this character that you are. What notices is presence. And in a way that becomes clear to me when I'm actually present, I realize that presence is more real than the world that it's looking out at. I know that's not how we think. We're sort of told that presence is something created by an organ like the brain, and it's going to go away somehow if the brain goes away. I have all these ways of thinking about it. It isn't, however, the yogic way. It's not the way of direct perception. So I'm speaking from the point of view of direct perception, that to be awake, to be present, there's a felt sense of stillness and a felt sense of what I could call eternity in it, of vastness. I can't account for that metaphysically. I don't have the metaphysics of the world to explain it. I don't have even, a way to explain it philosophically or scientifically or any other way. But as a yogi, as a person who actually opens the inner eye, the eye of the heart, works to bring that into focus, works to heal that so it's not divided and obscured by delusions. When I rest in presence, there is a felt sense of something vast and still. It's not going anywhere. While time and space move through it. That's at least my description of presence. So, in all of our coming to rest, there are various layers, of that. Many of us want to come to rest because we're just too busy and too tired and too frazzled, and we want to recover, we want to recuperate. We want that rest. Our bodies need that rest. Our minds need that rest. But on a deeper level, if we are to really wake up to what we are, it requires us to stop. It requires us to stop enough to notice that place of stillness inside. I think it's really the reason why in a Buddhist practice we have these ways of stilling the mind. We have these ways of stilling the body and the mind so that this other quality can step forward and be known. And that we really can come to know ourselves as presence. Not our particular personalities, not our particular identities, not our accomplishments, not what people say about us or what we think about ourselves. All those are floating around in the experience. But right at the core, right at the heart, what the heart is presence. It's this very mysterious quality that makes everything else possible as an experience. Everything else relies on it. The other thing that I find mysterious is that when you're present and you notice other people's presence, it's often confusing whether that's two presences or one. The kind of numbering of it seems arbitrary. One could almost say both people are in presence. Or as one person said to me not too long ago, as a child, she realized that what was looking out of her eyes was the same as what was looking out of someone else's eyes. That same it was presence meeting presence. And so there's this incredible possibility, the way things are set up. It's not like presence is just something alone and captured inside of one's head, but it's actually something shared. It's actually something running through reality. Before I started the class tonight, I had a moment of eye to eye with our dog Kiva. Kiva has the most beautiful eyes, very soulful, deep sort of eyes. And there was just the recognition, that similar sort of recognition that I just described, of presence meeting presence. Who really knows what goes on in her mind in a thought way? I often wish I could somehow just become her consciousness, even for an hour, to know what she gets from smelling things. Because I have the feeling it's totally mind-blowing, the degree of differentiation and understanding that arises from her nose. I have that sense, but of course, I don't have direct experience of it. But what I do have a very direct experience of is her presence, her sense of being there, my sense of being there, a sense of being together. And when I do that, I feel like everything calms down. Everything comes into stillness. And I never want to take that for granted. With any being, with any being, I don't want to take for granted this moment that we share as presence with each other. It seems to be the reason we're here, to be with each other. When it all boils down to it, all the rigmarole of life, all the, getting things done, providing for yourself, food, shelter, your car, maintaining your car, your work, everything you do in the world, all your thoughts, all your learning, all of it, you're entertaining yourself, you're creating music, you're creating writing, you're reading, you're on and on. You're hiking in the woods. It all boils down to being present. It all boils down to being with what's here. So that to me is really the font of gratitude. And also goodwill. I mentioned goodwill, just mentioned it briefly. But when you really come into presence and you realize that everyone has presence or is presence, and that everyone is sensate and suffers, it's easy for the heart to be softer and to offer people goodwill. In a funny way that, again, I can't exactly explain. You're really offering yourself goodwill when you offer someone else goodwill. They're not separate from you. And perhaps that goes back to the sense of presence, that is presence, you each have individual presence, or is presence something we all are connected into? It's sort of like the way you can describe light as a wave, or you can describe light as a particle. And when you think about particles and waves, they aren't really at all compatible with each other, and yet light is both. I think of presence the same way. Presence is so beyond us to know. that we can't really come up with one model for it. So those are my shortly before the solstice thoughts for you tonight.